let me start with a confession. The very first time that I hired for the Founders Playground, I thought I'd cracked the code. I thought I had found the perfect way to grow my business. I'd worked successfully with students before, and so I recruited and found interns that had super impressive resumes. And on paper, this was brilliant. They expanded the capabilities of my firm. I hired people to do things that I couldn't do. But what happens on paper doesn't always translate into business outcomes. And so it was a $10,000 failure. It was super frustrating because while they had the skills, what their resume, what their cover letter, what the interviews, and what their references couldn't tell me was whether I was prepared to give them the guidance that they needed to grow into and to deliver the business outcomes that I expected and needed. It couldn't tell me whether I had the management systems in place to support their young minds and their career growth. And so it ended in a $10,000 catastrophe. But I am stubborn as heck. Friday afternoon I'm presenting, right? If that gives you any indication. So I was like, nope, this is not going to stand. Both because as a business advisor, I didn't want to lead my clients to making the same mistake, right? I'm a former business advisor with the Alabama Small Business Development Center, and I'd used all of the same advice that I was giving my clients to get myself to $54,000 of revenue in my very first year of business. So I was like, this is very validating. And then I hit that number and I was like, we got to do something differently. What I needed was a new lens to evaluate candidates that it would allow me to compare their skills, their flexibility to my skills, my flexibility, and to evaluate technology as a multiplier effect to accomplish those business outcomes. So today you're going to hear from three perspectives. I'm Catherine Zobry, former Alabama Small Business Development Center advisor and founder and CEO of the Founders Playground. With me today is Morgan Rainey, my employee, former employer of the Troy University Small Business Development Center, and she's going to share the employee perspective. And then finally, you'll hear from Juliana Bolivar, the Center Director of Troy University Small Business Development Center, which is part of the Alabama network. And she's going to share not just how she cultivates the student pipeline, but how she curates it in a way that supports small businesses like mine. Because mine has not been the only business that has benefited from the work-study students that she's cultivated. All right. So I was determined that failure did not have to be catastrophic, that it has to be survivable, that we cannot eliminate failure, and nor should we try, because failure is where we build resilience. It's where we encounter and build courage. And without resilience and courage, that next entrepreneurial step is impossible. So what we're going to look at today is really the balancing of priorities and how we make it all work. We already know that we're busy people. We know that the small businesses we work with are busy people. But what the small businesses who are hiring tend to forget is that their employees are also very busy people. And when you're stuck in that $50,000 revenue range, it's really hard to envision how you can make it work with a very part-time person. And so when we're balancing priorities, it's not just stressful. Sometimes it's guilt and shame inducing, especially when we're trying to balance family and business commitments. Getting that pull from, seeing your kids' first day of school, for all of those firsts that you'd miss. This year, I missed my husband was in a motorcycle wreck 5 years ago, and this year he got his running leg. He is now running. He's an above the knee amputee, and he got his running leg. Huge accomplishment. I was 3 states away working. We planned for it. We talked about it, but at the moment, I'll never get back, right? And so the small businesses that we're working with and the employees that they're trying to hire are also facing these kinds of pulls that draw mental and emotional energy away from their business. I promised a Disney analogy, and here it is. So the small business, it's not a Disney production, right? With a whole backstage crew, lights and cameras, right? It's me setting it up. It's you doing the delivery, right? It's messy. It's exhausting. And unfortunately, it's also very risky because it's one person, right? So we don't have that full crew to support us. Welcome. But we're not going for a flawless performance. The important part is to keep the spotlight on the most important parts of the business. That's going to change from business to business and maybe from day to day in the same business. But the gift that Small Business Development Center advisors give to clients is helping them focus on what's important, not trying to juggle all of the balls that they have in the air. It's helping them understand which cues they can never miss, that final moment on stage, and which cues, if there's an unsewn hem in the back of somebody's dress, they can skip on. So let's do a little experiment. If you are a center director and also provide business advising, clap. If you have a side hustle in addition to a full-time job, clap. If you're a primary caregiver, whether it's a parent, a relative, a child, and I include pets as mother of 4 cats and a dog, clap. If you have community, volunteer, faith, or other things, it could be a book club or the tree that you always water in your backyard, please clap. All right. And y'all have time to come to this conference? I'm impressed. So what we heard is the sound of layered lives. And that includes the businesses, obviously, that we're working with and the employees that they're trying to hire. The 9-to-5, 30 years and retire with a gold watch. I think the Visa guy on stage yesterday might be the only one at this entire conference who's doing that these days, right? So workers are bringing that level of complexity into the jobs as well. They're bringing their job and a side hustle. For Morgan, I'm the side hustle. They're bringing school and work. They're splitting their weekends, taking care of their own kids and a disabled parent or relative or neighbor. And here's the kicker. 27% of U.S. children live in single-parent households. Of that 27%, 80% of that, so 80% of the 27%, are headed by women. In those households, childcare can eat up to 75% of their income. Now, this isn't Visa's economist graph. This is from treasury.gov. But housing prices are going up. I should know. I just put a $375,000 offer in on a 1,200 square foot house. Thank you, New Jersey. Rent is going up. Healthcare over the next couple of years is going to get so much more expensive. So with these trends in mind, it's not surprising that 27% of the population has a side hustle. The slides did not get uploaded to this event, but if you leave me your card or your email address, I promise I will get it to you. I have handouts as well to complement this. So when our small business clients are asking us, like, how do I get from this $50,000 ceiling to $100,000? What they're really asking is, how do I hire somebody within my budget without burning out? They might be saying, I'm afraid that if I hire somebody and they run out of cash, we're both going to be worse off. That doubles the shame of failure when you have to lay somebody off, right? So our job as business advisors is not to eliminate the fear or the risk. It's to show them a framework that takes those $10,000 failures, those catastrophic failures, and shrinks the size of the failure. It gives them more lead time to understand how to mitigate that failure so that they can better prepare, pivot, or provide for themselves a nicer off-ramp. Our job is to make sure that when they do drop a ball, it's not going to crush them. Okay. I used AI to generate this. You'll notice at the end when she throws the glass ball and it shatters but doesn't shatter at the same time. So I want you to picture this. Every commitment that we, our clients, and their employees are juggling are different balls. We may have 50 balls in the air at any one time. Could be, do I end this client call on time? Or do I finish this critical conversation and ask the next person to wait? Do I finish this project that I'm thinking deeply about? Or do I show up to this event on time? Right? All of those are balls that we're juggling. Do I pick up my kid on time? Or do I finish this P&L? Right? All of those different commitments. But not all balls are the same. Some of them are plastic and some of them are glass. This is not mine originally. I don't know who to give credit. I give my therapist credit for this one. But it's not hers originally either. When we drop the plastic balls, they might scuff. Maybe they roll a little bit depending on the surface we're standing on, but you can pick them up later. The glass balls, they're the ones that shatter and we don't have a chance to necessarily redo. So our job is not to ask, how many balls can you juggle at the same time? Our job is to ask, which balls are the most important for you to keep in the air? Which ones can you never drop? Or put another way, since this is the future of work, not therapy by Catherine, how do you build work structures that protect the most important commitments of the employee and the employer? Let me show you. I would love to just leave you there. What a cliffhanger. So this is the new work equation. This slide doesn't mean much to you yet. I promise I will explain over the next 60 minutes. This model gives you a way to talk to entrepreneurs about three things: the employee contribution and flexibility, the employer contribution and flexibility, and the T is technology as a multiplier, using the right technology to multiply or amplify both. So let's look into the variables. So E is the employee contribution. This is the skills, the motivation, the initiatives. This is more than just resume bullet points. It's their real practical skills that are helping the business close the gap that they're hired to close. It's the MVP in human form. What is the most critical thing that business needs to move to the next level? Can that candidate close that gap? It's a fit test, right? Do we have any product managers, product developers, tech folks in the room? Okay, MVP being minimal viable product. Can it solve the biggest problem that startup is facing? It answers the burning question: what are the chances that this person's contribution is actually going to let my business get there? Alpha, funky A, alpha is the employee flexibility. Now, we're not talking necessarily just mental gymnastics. Can they pick up new concepts, right? The cerebral or intellectual flexibility. We're talking practical. What are the priorities that this individual has? Is my small business going to consistently be their last priority? Or can I ask for them to move me up their priorities when I need them the most? When there's a cyber attack, for example, and I need them to change their passwords. If we've got a big deadline, would they be willing to drop one of their other obligations? So it's a practical look at their priorities and their schedule to understand how the small business fits in. So it's not just about will it. We're not asking the question, what would you do? We're asking, last time you had a varsity soccer match, last time you had an exam, last time your kids got sick, how did you cover the rest of your responsibilities? Right? How did you make that all work? Now, I'm not an HR expert. Morgan is. She's not going to tell us today, but I rely on her for like the stay in bounds on the HR side of things. So employee flexibility measures whether the worker's life outside those layered pieces of their lives are going to align with the rhythms of the business. M is employer contribution. It's the structure, the pay, the onboarding, the capacity, the management structures, the skills of the employer to identify what that job is that needs to be done, to provide the training or upskilling, and then to break tasks down to set that employee up for success. The knowledge to be able to transfer the vision of what needs to happen, the end state, to what needs to happen to get there. Beta is the employer flexibility. It's the practical reality of how much time the business owner has to actually onboard and train and support and provide guidance to, and all of those time commitments to the employee. And T, of course, is the technology multiplier? What is the right technology that can amplify the skills and lower the friction in the new work relationships? So hopefully we've learned a little bit about technology this week. If you've taken an AI class, give me a round of applause. All right. Excellent. Okay. So at this point, you're probably thinking, Catherine, I hate math. My clients, I can't even get them to calculate their COGS, their gross profit. They don't know unit economics. This is going to be literally Greek to them, right? That's okay. If you do like math, let's collaborate on some research because this is theory only. I've got case studies, but no research, and I'd love to collaborate on some research. So knowing that about myself, my own clients, and the hundreds of clients that I've worked with, I have a matrix as well. So here's the matrix. We map this on a 2x2. So if you're a fan of the Eisenhower matrix, that the urgent and important matrix, if you're a fan of the do the right thing the right way matrix, stick this in your toolbox. This is another good one. And you can use it in the whole life cycle of hiring. Before your clients hire, you can use it to help them evaluate their own gaps, and that'll help structure the job description. When you're hiring, you use this to evaluate the candidates and the business owner's capabilities against the job description. And then afterwards, you can use it to identify what additional gaps might need to be covered, either by bringing in additional time on your plate or the small business owner's plate, or maybe additional expertise. For Morgan and I, we hired an AI consultant to help us level up our AI and automation skills. We took a 4-hour class last year, much earlier this year. Mm-hmm. So on one axis, we map the skills, high to low, and the other axis, we map the flexibility, high to low. We do this for both the employee and the employer. The impact coach, misalignment, and specialist zone, those are specific to the employee matrix or the candidate matrix. So let's look at these different quadrants. In the high skills, high flexibility, that's the impact zone. This is where alignment is the strongest, and you're going to get the fastest return on investment of these candidates. And again, we're comparing the candidates to the job description, not to the best in the industry for that, because if you're paying $12.50 an hour, you're not going to get a $250 an hour consultant for that, with that resume. They're often the most financially expensive, but again, they have the fastest return on investment. Just don't confuse independence there with with the need for, you still need to onboard them, right? They still need structured onboarding. They're not completely independent there. The low skills, high flexibility, that's the coach zone. These folks you can train because they are adaptable and they have the flexibility in their schedule to come to trainings. They're the most time expensive, but often have the longer term payoff because you can start them at a lower rate. You can increase their wages as they gain more skills, and there tends to be a reciprocal relationship there, and you can offset what you might pay them in cash and wages with professional development, with expanding their professional network, with the flexibility that they may need to grow into a field that they'd prefer to be in rather than wherever they are right now. So you can offset some of the cash flow needs with some intangibles. The specialist zone is a flight risk because they have low flexibility and high skills. These folks, obviously deservingly, know their worth. This is a zone where you may want to encourage clients to hire consultants rather than employees, especially if their flexibility and the small business owner that you're working with also has low flexibility and the calendars don't line up. And I'll give you an example of how that worked in my business in a little bit. Yes, high skill, low flexibility. And then the final one is the misalignment zone. These candidates have low flexibility and low skill. Generally speaking, and again, not tested by empirical research, but you'll see 3 case studies that show what happens in that zone. That's where small business resources go to die. That was my $10,000 loss. I couldn't get the same team on the same page to meet at the same time so that we could use the little skills that they had to accomplish the business goals that I needed accomplished. Generally speaking, they're the most time and resource expensive. So let's look at these. There we go. So that's the employee and candidate kind of analysis and where they might fit on the matrix. But we as advisors, this is where we really get to shine, is when we're talking to the business owners about how to evaluate their own skills on this matrix and with the equation. You can do this analysis at multiple points, and it's best if you can start before the hiring process, but at any point it will provide value to that business owner. And again, I'll have a session handout that has the questions that you can ask to prompt the business owners to think about where they fall in the matrix, and a template of questions that you can give them to give you can give to your clients when they're hiring to evaluate where their candidates land on the matrix. So Morgan and I are going to do a little demonstration of what this might look like in practice with your clients. Morgan is my business advisor in this little demonstration.
Keep the job description open. Now let's look at the resume of your candidate. How would you rank their skill levels? It might be helpful to look at both the actual skill and the depth of their experience. For example, someone may ask they're an expert in coding in Python, but they've only done 1 or 2 projects outside of school. That's really beginner level.
Well, based on the resume, it looks like they have beginner skills in this area, and I would say moderate skills in that area. So maybe somewhere between moderate and low skill.
Great. So let's tentatively place them on the skills axis of our matrix between beginner and moderate. Now let's talk about flexibility. When you interviewed the candidate, what did you learn about their flexibility? How might that flexibility change over time?
So they said they could work 15 to 20 hours a week now, which is great. That's more than I need. But they're a student, and when they start university in the fall, their hours will probably dip to about 10 hours a week.
Okay, so on the flexibility axis, we probably place them closer to the high right now, since you're advertising the job to be 10 hours a week. But you may have to readjust once they start school. So here's where they land on the matrix. Moderate skills, high flexibility. The quadrant is what I like to call the coach zone. Let's pause here and look at your matrix. Do you have enough time to coach them up to the level where they can deliver?
I actually don't. I am super busy. I just won another contract. That's why I'm hiring. But they were a great cultural fit. They could demonstrate how they're moving my company values forward in their own lives. And I really want to work with them.
Okay, so here's where the framework helps. If this is a candidate that you really want to move forward with, the key question is, can you increase your flexibility as an employer to balance this out? That might mean breaking up tasks into smaller, more independent projects, or using technology or templates, AI prompt banks, step-by-step guides, or short instructional videos so they can work while you do other things.
That makes sense. But it sounds like so much work.
With technology, most of these will take a lot less time than you think. For example, you can use Scribe to screen capture tasks as you perform them in real time to create step-by-step guides, or you can use Loom to make short videos to explain the process and end product. You can dictate the steps of tasks by processes in ChatGPT and have it create standard operating procedures, or have Claude suggest ways to break up projects into smaller, more bite-sized chunks. Remember, the resume helps you to see your skill level, the interview helps you to understand their flexibility, and the matrix helps you see whether the alignment is realistic, given your own capacity as an employer.
Can we give Morgan a round of applause?
Thanks, Sid.
Thank you, Morgan. You're a great business advisor. I want to take a minute to shout out my own business advisor with the Alabama Small Business Development Center, Carolyn Turner. She's been presenting this week on international trade. So as you heard from our demonstration, we're not saying yes, hire, or no, don't hire. We're providing them a framework in which to evaluate and see the candidate in a different light. This conversation and the matrix really makes that abstract equation much more concrete with our clients. And remember, the goal is not to make the small business the top priority of the employee. That's unrealistic. Sometimes the small business isn't even the top priority of the business owner. And the matrix is not meant to replace the interview or the resume. Those are still critical factors. The resume helps narrow the field, and the matrix helps understand the actual alignment in practicality. So if the candidate passes the culture and value checks that the interview provides, the matrix then allows the business owner to see whether their own capacity and skills and flexibility match and will provide fertile grounds for that employee to grow into that high impact zone. So the matrix answers, will this work in practice? You've seen the matrix, you've seen the equation. Now let's, and we walked through a client example. So we're going to present 3 different case studies, and each one unfolds a little bit differently. We've got 2 success stories and 1 failure, and we'll point out the similarities and differences along the way. The first case story is Morgan's, a failure. No, I'm just kidding, obviously. Oh my gosh, right? A success, obviously. Yeah, right?
No.
So Morgan and I met while she was a graduate assistant at Troy University's Small Business Development Center. And I brought her in to take a lot of the admin and some program development off of my plate. The things that I asked Morgan to do, mostly, for the most part, we did co-create, and we are co-creating more and more as she is more and more onboarded. But the things that I asked her to do were things that I'd been doing since the development of my business, and often for clients that we'd served. And so I had a high skill level in the areas that I'd put on the job description. I also work in my business full time. And so I had a lot of flexibility to accommodate the need for coaching and things like that for Morgan. So the alignment on my side reduced the risk. And I used it. I didn't use it because I didn't have this equation, but my experience with Morgan helped inform what the equation and the matrices are today. So Morgan, would you mind sharing what it felt like from your side of things? And could you use one of the mics as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
So, thanks, Catherine. I graduated in July, so I went to Troy University, and just to tie it back around to what she said before, I got my bachelor's degree in human resource management at Troy, and I also have my master's in project management. So I graduated in July with my master's last July, and like a lot of students, I was searching for a full-time role. I was upfront with Catherine from the start that I was actually job hunting. At the time, the Founders Playground couldn't offer a full-time position with benefits. What worked is that we had an open conversation about it. Catherine asked me to keep her updated on my search so we could rebalance the work if needed. We interviewed in December of last year, and I started in January. So from the beginning, the onboarding was very intentional. It wasn't just, here's your login, good luck. I spent about 2 weeks, roughly 30 hours on onboarding. Catherine and I met for about 6 to 8 hours during those 2 weeks. The rest of the time I spent working through the things on my own. Catherine, how much time did you spend on onboarding me?
So I spent about 5 hours developing things like the employee handbook and the onboarding guide, and getting her set up in payroll and doing all of those, I-9 verifications and all those things that you have to do when you're hiring somebody. So it's about 5 hours before Morgan started. And then we spent 8 hours in a combination of virtual and in-person meetings during her onboarding. But she onboarded the first 2 weeks. Yep. And she spent roughly 30 hours. So 30, including those 8 hours that we met. How long are your clients onboarding when they're hiring new employees? They're just press and go? Yeah, yes, not including the interview. Yeah, they just need help. I mean, I can relate to that. It's, when you need help, it's already 3 weeks too late to have that help. So,
yeah.
That you don't want to do it before the contract is signed because you can't guarantee the cash flow. So thanks, Morgan. We'll get to her matrix in a minute.
So while I was onboarding, Catherine could continue running the business. So here's what my onboarding looked like. Some of it was in person. Especially when I transitioned from a PC to Mac. That part was tough, and doing it side by side made it easier though. Catherine could literally see my screen and walk me through the setup. Most of it was virtual, with structured practice and tasks, so I could practice using the tools the Founders Playground relies on. Zoom, shared docs, and project software. Catherine also gave me a second monitor, which sounds small, but it helped out a lot. It meant we could work on Zoom without constantly having to switch windows or moving menu bars. That combination of formats, tasks, and tools helped me to learn quickly. It wasn't just about memorizing processes. It was about building confidence while learning the skills. Of course, there were challenges. Here are the biggest challenges I faced. First, switching contents was tough. Moving back and forth between job searching and project work took discipline. Some days it was hard to mentally shift gears. Second, the technology learning curve was steep. Beyond just adjusting to the Mac, some of the tools we used were ones that Catherine, by her own admission, wasn't an expert in either. So we figured them out together until we landed on a process that worked perfect. Lastly, clarity and communication. Because I was new, clarity mattered. I needed to know not just what to do, but why it mattered. There were times I asked for a step-by-step instructions from Catherine, and instead she would lay out the bigger picture to challenge me to think through my own approach. At first, that was very frustrating, but over time, it strengthened my critical thinking skills. It also took time to learn each other's communication styles. What made a big difference is that neither of us expected perfection. Even after onboarding, we approached each other with generosity. One of the core elements of Braving Inventory from the book Dare to Lead, the book says generosity is extending the most generous interpretation to the intentions, words, and actions of others. This allowed us to bring work through the tough situations while not ever having doubt about our worthiness. Then in February, I accepted a full-time position with the City of Tuscaloosa Housing Authority. Even though I had been upfront with Catherine from the beginning, I'll admit I was nervous to tell her. But when I did, she was genuinely excited for me. Yes, a little sad, but still excited. We scaled back our hours significantly during this time with my onboarding with the Housing Authority. So I had time to adjust without being too overwhelmed with both obligations. Now we meet virtually on Wednesdays and Thursdays to kick off our week, and I handle most of my tasks during those times. If needed, I can work on the weekends or evenings, but the core of my work is done during those times. So what happened as my flexibility decreased? Catherine's flexibility increased. That balance is what kept me engaged and made it possible for me to stay contributing to the Founders Playground while also growing in my full-time role. If I map myself on the skills flexibility matrix, I started with moderate skills and high flexibility. Over time, my flexibility decreased, but my skills increased. Because Catherine could flex as an employer, the match still worked. For me, the biggest takeaway is that onboarding and adaptability weren't just nice to haves. They were the foundation. They made it safe to learn, safe to ask questions, and safe to grow in my responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. While I am literally paying her to be here and say this, it wouldn't do any of us any good to ignore those challenges. They come up regularly. The point isn't to minimize those challenges, or it's not to eliminate the challenges or eliminate the fear of those challenges. It's to minimize the catastrophe of those challenges so that one awkward conversation doesn't turn into a you're fired or I quit. It doesn't turn into a sabotaging on the back end, right? Those are the kinds of catastrophes we're able to avoid through the technology. Like sometimes it's simple, like that second monitor. Sometimes it's simple, like text messaging back and forth. And sometimes it's a little bit more complex, like the project management system that we set up together. So the power of Morgan's case study is not just where she landed on the matrix. It highlights that the flexibility and onboarding reduce my need to refill her role consistently. It increases retention and reduces the need to constantly be looking for new talent to fill those roles. Did I mention that she also works for her family business? Her family has a funeral home. She works there on the weekends, and she takes international trips with her girlfriends. She's busy, right? And so I just ask that my business doesn't stay at the bottom of her to-do list. And so we carve out time specifically on Wednesdays and Thursday nights where we have virtual office hours to get the bulk of the work done for the week. Now let's transition to Juliana. So Juliana's going to preview another risk reduction strategy. So we've kind of moved from the matrix and the equation and using these case studies to preview the 10 risk reduction strategies that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. So Morgan didn't just fall out of the sky, although I am blessed to be working with her. She came through a curated pipeline. Does anybody here work with students through your SBDC? Almost everybody. Those students are my pipeline of talent. Anytime you have students working with or in front of, whether it's providing research to small businesses, that is a chance for the small business to see their work ethic, to see their skills, to see their flexibility in action. Are they meeting those deadlines? How much back and forth is there? Can you give them critical feedback as a boss or as a client and have them respectfully deliver? Can I, as a boss, give them respectful feedback? So these are skills that go both ways, right? So Juliana has been an incredible partner. She's the center director of the Small Business Development Center at Troy University. She's also a small business owner herself. And she's going to show you how her structure creates these programs, how she nurtures the students, and how that pays off for both her center in terms of recognition with her host institution, as well as the small businesses in her community.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Morgan, for sharing your story. Unfortunately, I couldn't be here today in person because I am part of the Rising Leadership Program. But hey, thanks to technology, I can be here enjoying the presentation. So what you just heard is the journey from a work study to a trusted employee. And that's exactly the reason why we invest so much energy into creating opportunities like this at Troy University. It's not an accident. And honestly, it's the product, the result of careful design, funding partnerships, and a lot of coordination behind the scenes. I'm not going to lie. It is a process that involves human resources, the deans, figuring out in the budget where you can fit it, or if you're going to get an additional source of funding for these positions, but it's totally worth it. So how these opportunities are built. At Troy, when we talk about work study, GAs, or project-based roles, we're not just talking about like generic student roles. I'm going to get an intern and they come in, answer the phone, help me here and there with an event. And, if I need to cover for something, they happen to be around, I'll ask them to do it. No. These opportunities are tied to specific grants or contracts or university-approved programs. So, for example, Morgan's role was tailored to support contractor work that Troy University is contracting with the Alabama Department of Transportation in the DBE Business Development Program. For that contract, we wrote a graduate student into the proposal and built it into the project. We have the scope of the student role, we had submitted for approval, and we made sure that the job description aligned not only with the university requirements for a GA, but also what we were expected to deliver to ALDA as an agency. So that structure gave Morgan a real-world responsibility and an opportunity to work alongside Catherine without the pressures of an employer-employee relationship. Other examples include the USDA Rural Business Development Grant. We use the funding that we receive from the agency to implement the Notre Dame's UPVI program. A critical part of this model is the student consulting portion. In their case, they implemented as a project inside of a professor's class. In this case, we didn't have that resource or that framework. So our students were trained as business consultants. But before they ever spoke to a client, Catherine and I co-review applications, co-interview the students. And while I was handling the HR and university requirements, to hire them as seasonal workshop students, Catherine adapted the UPVI curriculum for the business participants into a mini MBA style in a 4-hour recorded video with interactive quizzes to test the knowledge along the way. And that was what made possible for them to contribute real value to the businesses, because at the end of the program, we wanted to have real tangible deliverables for the business owners in the program. So when this whole part of the program concluded, Catherine hired Jaden, one of the student consultants, in a temporary position with the Founders Playground. And she had seen that student in action. She had seen the responsibility that she had, the level of commitment, and she was a great fit for the job. So this works for the students because it's more than resumes. It gives them a transformative experience. And they move from learning in the classroom to practicing in the field. They learn what is being a business advisor as a career. They learn what is to deliverable in that is tied to a deadline. They hear feedback from a client, sometimes not so gently, but we give them a framework of what is your responsibility, what is not, and how to solve problems that don't come with an answer key. So what this works for small businesses is because this arrangement is a low risk. They're not jumping straight to payroll. They're not hiring somebody untested, but they get many times to work for the first time with a person under them that, cuts those responsibilities that probably are preventing them from growing. So they get to see how the student works, communicates, and adapts. For the Founders Playground, she's both a program consultant for the HR and all that. She even gets paid to manage and support the students. And for me, I get to focus on the SBDC core goals, making sure that my pipeline of new clients are being assigned to advisors, that we have a scope of works, that the client has upfront expectations of what we can and cannot do, that we are fulfilling new needs, that we are creating tools and new materials that we can share with our clients. So I'm upfront while we are also serving and continue working on the other projects and programs that we have to supplement what we do in our core funding. So it allows the SBDC to broaden the reach and deepen the pipeline of clients that we support, and mainly create a pipeline of people that otherwise would not be ready for like the SBD assistance. We're not looking, you're not looking to launch your business in 3 months and 6 months. You probably have to work in a lot of things first, getting your credit ready, getting probably your personal finances ready. And this is when this supplemental programs come, and this is where the students become great support for us. I think getting back to the admin assistant work study positions we run, in the surface, they might look like small roles, but for the entrepreneurs that we serve, having a student with, the ability to take on those small time-consuming tasks is what is going to free up the owner's focus and let them look at the possibilities for growth. It's low cost, low risk way to expand capacity, and sometimes it's the very first step in a longer employment relationship, like we would saw with Morgan. So the process behind the scenes, you might ask, like, how this happens at the university. This just doesn't happen. Every time we place a student, there is a process. The source funding might be a federal grant like the USDA, or state contract like with the university got Department of Transportation or Department of Human Resources. Maybe the university has work study funds. In my case, we have tied in directly to a project that is secure. Each one requires a proposal, budget approval, alignment with internal systems. It means that sponsor programs accounting, so we make sure we have the funds, HR, making sure that even if they're hired as contractors, workshop, interns, professors, if they are trying to get credit for the work that we're trying to do. So yes, there are multiple players. The career center, if we, like this week, we were trying to hire for an intern position for community management of the Department of Human Resources program. But the outcomes, the result of this coordination is more than the hours that work. It's recognition. The university gets the credit for designing meaningful pathways. In fact, the Department of Communication of the university actually is working on the story, in which we kind of showcase the timeline and how in the last 3-4 years we have created a pathway for students like Morgan, Kiana, now Kiara, Jaden, Caitlin, and how their work has been recognized in multiple areas in the university, earning awards in community service and being recognized for taking pride on the impact that the university has in their community. So the stories where a student was just placed, and they got great experience, go beyond that. They go about university pride, they go about community impact. It goes to attracting more partners, more grants, and more opportunities in economic development, workforce development, and creating the next wave of students, business owners, and business advisors. So what's the key takeaway for business advisors and center directors? To me, it's to say that the talent honestly just doesn't appear. It's structured, it's supported by a very intentional design in our programs and supplemental programs. When the advisors, universities, and the entrepreneurs, we will work together through different grants, additional contracts, or work study roles, we create a cycle that benefits everyone. These pipelines just don't reduce the risk, but they expand our opportunities for students, for businesses, and for the communities definitely we serve. So I hope we can connect later. Here in the presentation is my email, but if you see me around, say hi. I would love to chat and exchange ideas about how you can implement this model in your center. Thanks.
So in the slide deck that you'll receive are notes about how she built, the different types of programs that she's leveraged for the work study and graduate assistant programs. She also segmented out her own role as well as the Founders Playground's role and why it works. So in Troy University's last round of accreditation, like the university level accreditation, they took their accreditation committee. This isn't the SBDC accreditation. This is the university's accreditation. And her department is one of the few departments that has tangible metrics on community impact. And those impact measurements include the student consulting hours that we did through Notre Dame's UPBI program. Is anybody here familiar with Notre Dame's UPBI? It's the Urban Poverty and Business Institute. It's a cool program. We adapted it from the urban setting to a more rural setting in Alabama, but it has a lot of support around it. And we use the USDA's Rural Business Development Grant to fund the rollout of that program. So my pipeline tends to be, because I love working with people in that coach zone, and it's not just because my budget is small. I love coaching. Educational is a core value of mine. I think if we can't provide jobs, what are we doing in business? So my pipeline tends to be students, work study, and then employees. The second case study I want to share is a program through the University of Alabama called STEM and Create Path to MBA. It's a really creative model. Students in their final undergraduate year start their MBA by taking a consulting class, and the businesses that participate become their clients. The business pitches a project, is matched with a team of 5 or 6 students, and the students are expected to deliver real business results and outcomes as consultants. I participated for 2 years, and while the program has promise, in my case it ended up being a failure because the alignment just wasn't there. In the first year, the students managed to do some research and pull together a non-working prototype, but the consulting sessions felt more like me lecturing. And I should know because I use one of those, Catherine, you're talking too much, monitors, so I know when I'm just filibustering. But that wasn't the case. The silences were deafening. The second year, I was very clear. I wanted real business outcomes. I wanted a working, minimal viable product. But the combination of their lack of technical skills and their lack of flexibility made it impossible. Let's map this on the skills and flexibility matrix. The students had low skills in the specific areas I needed, coding and prototyping. On paper, they looked pretty solid, but again, the technical and critical thinking skills just didn't play out in reality. Their flexibility was also not great. In their second semester working with me, we tried to set up one meeting. We exchanged 87 text messages and ran 2 polls. I offered evenings, I offered weekends, even late nights while traveling. I had high flexibility, and I brought the technology piece to boot. I offered recordings, one-on-ones, kickoff sessions and calls, asynchronous relationships or asynchronous teamwork. I even offered a budget to get the technology that they recommended that would make our lives easier. Still, we could not make it work. The only time the whole team was available was 7 a.m. on Mondays. No, thank you. If I were running a webinar, that level of engagement would have been incredible. But I wasn't running a webinar. I wasn't running a training. It was just to get the darn meeting on the calendar so that we could start work. The unfortunate part is that I also had low technical skills in the areas that I needed them to develop. And that's where they needed the most support. So instead of filling my gaps, the project really just amplified them. I sat in my office and realized that I had spent more time scheduling and coordinating than they had spent building. And that was the moment it hit me. I wasn't just disappointed in the project. It was a sunk cost. Hours I'd never get back. The progress my business would never see. And that kind of drain isn't just frustrating for a small business, it's dangerous. Here's the research-backed truth. You cannot manage your way out of a skill deficit. If the skills are not in the team somewhere, the project will not get done. So in the end, I invested a significant amount of time across the 2 semesters, but got no real business results. Again, the students had very low skills and very low flexibility. They were in the misalignment zone. And this is the key takeaway for advisors. This is the quadrant where many small businesses waste precious resources. That's not just a frustration. It's a sunk cost that can set businesses back instead of moving them forward. Let's compare the STEM Path to MBA program with my experience with QuantHub's Data Scholars internship, because on the surface, they looked like an apples to apples match. Both programs provided interns, both had backing and resources of larger institutions, both promised students with the skills to deliver. But the small differences between the STEM interns and QuantHub interns made a really big difference in outcomes. Let's talk about it. QuantHub's Data Science Scholars Program is an 8-week intensive data science program. Students, mostly high schoolers, go through a track-based learning program to build their technical and critical thinking skills in data science. And as an employer, I got to interview them and select the students that I wanted to work with. And that's where the real difference started. After the MBA experience, I was very upfront with QuantHub. I lacked the technical skills in this domain, and I had been frustrated by the inflexibility in the past. So I needed interns who not only had the skills, but could adapt and had the technical resources in the QuantHub program to fulfill any managerial skills that I lacked over the kind of technical projects that I wanted to see manifest. After reviewing their resumes, I leaned on the program manager to help me understand the technical skills that I would need from them that would be essential to achieving the business outcomes desired. And believe me, I needed the help. It was not so long ago that I thought a full stack developer was someone who made only full stacks of pancakes. When I interviewed the QuantHub students, I wanted to see more than just a resume or cover letter could show me. So I tested 2 things. How quickly they could learn and how quickly they could communicate what they had learned. For example, I'd introduce them to a new idea or tool they hadn't worked with before, and then ask them to explain that back to me in their own words. The ones who could absorb the concept, translate it, and even apply it to a simple example right there in the interview, those were the students who showed both skill and flexibility. Another question that I asked in the interview was for them to tell me about a recent project that they were proud of. And then I dug deeper because the project that they're proud of told me a lot about their values. It told me a little bit about their technical skills in applications, and digging deeper made a big difference as well. The first follow-up question I asked was, what tools, resources, and skills did you use to accomplish this project? This got them thinking about themselves as problem solvers, setting us up as a successful team and not making them rely on me for every answer they needed. It also gave me a breadth of tools that I could point them and their teammates back to when they did inevitably run into issues. The second follow-up question I asked was, what was the community impact of your work? That forced the students to contextualize the projects that they were doing in a greater societal good, aligning the work that they do with the human impact that we're trying to create at the Founders Playground. This showed me how they live the Founders Playground values in their own lives and how they can understand their relationship to the communities that they operate in. These questions told me a lot. The project details revealed their technical skills, the list of resources showed me their problem-solving styles, and the impact question showed me their values, whether they understood the bigger picture and why their work mattered. Combined with the progress in their Quant Hub education track, that gave me the confidence I wasn't just hiring students who knew the material on paper. I was bringing on people who could adapt, problem solve, and contribute in real time, and who cared about the impact of their work. So let's map it on the matrix. The interns had high skills, high flexibility. I had low skills in this domain, but high flexibility. And that's why the alignment worked. Beyond the hiring process, the onboarding itself was actually fun. I gave each intern one of 3 prototyping tools, Cursor, Retool, and Replit, and challenged them to build something functional in under 10 hours. Here's what they came up with. Mung built a shareable to-do list. Sherman developed a movie selection database that used machine learning to recommend films based on your initial picks. And Samantha built a recruiting and onboarding tracker for student clubs. That exercise let them showcase their skills not just to me, but also to each other. We also discussed the pros and cons of each platform in terms of the project we wanted to work on together, though through this mini hackathon, we explored the potential tech stack and got to see each other's strengths early on. This allowed closer collaboration and fear-free question asking later on. Once they were up and running, we worked in an office hours model. About 3 of the 10 hours they worked each week were live Zoom sessions, camera on, coding in real time. Most of the time was quiet, everyone focused on their work. But the moment someone hit a wall, we'd pause problem solving together. These sessions weren't just about fixing bugs. They built a kind of collaborative muscle memory where asking for help and learning from each other became the norm. Now, I didn't have the technical or coding skills to contribute to their code, but I didn't need to. They had their Quant Hub training and resources. What I could contribute was leadership, entrepreneurial experience, and systems thinking. For example, I couldn't even finish the guided tutorial of the platform that we landed on. We ended up using Retool. But when one student walked me through his coding in plain language, I was able to apply systems thinking lenses that cut his timeline in hard coding the variables down by 2/3. That was the turning point for me. I realized I could still be a thought partner, adding value without writing a single line of code. I realized I could manage people who could do things that would expand the capacity of the Founders Playground. I realized I could hire people who could do things that I couldn't do. The interns also showed real flexibility. They kept working through vacations, family trips, whatever life threw at them. And they didn't just adapt, they communicated early and often. In fact, at the end of the program, they even gave me feedback. They wanted more frequent timeline and project updates in our GroupMe, which was our main chat tool. That kind of initiative showed me that they weren't just doing the work, they were helping improve how we work together. The result was real progress, a working prototype, and the confidence to scale. In fact, because of this program, I've opened up 4 Venture Studio associate program positions and plan to keep hiring competitive talent through the Quant Hub program. So what did this show me? It showed me that when the skills are in place and both sides are flexible, the barriers to failure drop dramatically. Even though it was still time intensive, the risk was low and the upside was enormous. That's what alignment looks like in the impact zone. Morgan was in the coach zone, Quant Hub data scholars in the impact zone, and the STEM Path to MBA program were in the misalignment zone. Morgan's story lands her in the coach zone because she came in with moderate skills, solid for her stage, but still early in her career and against the job description. And paired that with high flexibility, that meant she could be coached. With intentional onboarding and trust, she grew into not just project support, but real revenue generation. The STEM Path to MBA program was a clear misalignment zone. Students had low technical skills compared to the job description and low flexibility. No matter how much I was flexible as their employer, there was no way to align and no outcomes delivered. This was the danger zone for small businesses. They spend time and energy, but the investment never pays off. The Quant Hub interns fall into the impact zone. They had strong technical skills for their level and brought high flexibility, meeting from vacations, juggling family commitments, and adapting quickly. Even though they were high school students, that combination produced real prototypes and the momentum for the business. The lesson for advisors is this. The coach zone can work if the employer is ready to invest in onboarding and mentoring. The impact zone is where things click. The hire delivers value quickly with relatively low risk. But don't confuse impact with independence. These employees still need intentional onboarding and leadership throughout. The specialist zone is where employees are flight risk and it may be better to hire an independent contractor. The misalignment zone is where resources go to die. Resumes and interviews will filter this pool, but the matrix is the alignment test, and your role is to guide clients towards hires who land in the impact or coach zone, because that's where sustainable growth can happen. These 3 stories show us how to use the matrix with your clients. The takeaway isn't just to hire the most skilled person or the most flexible person. It's to map both sides, the employee and the employer, and look for the alignment or misalignment. That's how we as advisors can help entrepreneurs reduce risk so that hiring becomes a growth strategy instead of a gamble. All right, so we've mapped skills and flexibility on the matrix. That's step 1. But there's another piece to this equation, technology multiplier. In the equation, the technology is a multiplier because the right technology can do 2 things. First, it amplifies strengths. If you already have someone with strong skills and good flexibility, technology helps them do even more. Second, it offsets weaknesses. If you've got someone with lower skills but high flexibility, the right tools can help them ramp up faster and contribute in ways they couldn't on their own. Let me give you some examples. With Morgan, it was as simple as adding a second monitor. 1 screen for Zoom, 1 screen for documents, so that we didn't have to continuously move menu bars around to collaborate in real time. When onboarding, I used structured task-based assignments through project tools. That gave new team members a safe way to explore the systems without the risk of messing up live work. With the Quant Hub interns, their skills were solid, but the real magic was Quant Hub's tech scaffolding. They had GitHub, they had structured data science educational tracks, and they even knew how to use ChatGPT and other generative AI tools to debug. That combination multiplied their effectiveness and made them valuable contributors in just 8 weeks. Here's how I think about it. The matrix tells us the alignment between skills and flexibility. The technology tells us what they can become inside the business. The matrix is step 1, technology is step 2. And here's the takeaway for us as business advisors. When talking to clients, the message is simple. Don't stop at flexibility. Ask what tools, systems, or processes could multiply this person's contributions. Are those tools available to me, and how much do they cost? When the skill and flexibility pieces are in place, technology acts as a multiplier. It reduces friction, increases alignment, and it makes it easier for both the small business owner and the employee to succeed without the fear that a small failure will become catastrophic. When we think about reducing the risk of hiring, most people picture the moment of hire, the interview, the offer, the letter, the day one. But the truth is, risk reduction strategies start long before someone walks through the door, and it continues long after they're on payroll. In the same way we do marketing and brand awareness, we need to be consistently cultivating that talent pipeline, understanding which pipelines bring us the best candidates, and developing our skills as leaders and managers so that when they do walk in the door, we are ready for them. I know you've heard this before, so please don't groan too loudly. Entrepreneurs, we love to say that we're building the plane while flying it. Here's the thing. No pilot has ever gotten on a plane where the wings were still being bolted on at 30,000 feet. What small businesses really need to know is this. First, is there a runway to take off from? 2, is there a flight plan once I'm in the air? And 3, are there systems in place to keep the plane in the air when turbulence inevitably hits? So that's how we're going to frame this next section. There are 10 strategies I'll walk you through, but don't worry, they're not just a scattered list. They fit into 3 stages of flights: building the runway, or extending it in this case, charting the flight plan, and keeping the plane in the air. Inside each stage, there are practical strategies, 10 in total, that give small businesses a safe and sustainable path to success. First, building or extending the runway. The runway makes takeoff possible. Without it, you're just revving the engine on the ground. For small businesses, the runway is built and extended through strong pipelines, structured hiring practices, and deep onboarding. Pipelines include work-study programs, technical training, internships, university partnerships, and more. These let the owner see people in action before the pressure of payroll. One of the great ideas that I've seen is in Mike Michalowicz's book, All In. It's a book that came out, I think, in 2025. He talks about how Home Depot recruits. Home Depot sets up workshops where they invite community members, maybe even for a small fee, to build a birdhouse or learn how to use a chop saw appropriately. I don't know. I've never been to one of these. Home Depot then looks for individuals that show patience with other people, offer to help the other participants, maybe show some interest and curiosity beyond their initial skills. So they're looking for and cultivating through an individual training where they're seeing people at work. And that's what we want to do. The pre-hiring practices include operational steps like careful resume screening, skill assessments, structured interviews, and reference checks. It also includes financial steps of building a budget and a buffer. Depending on the industry and cost structure, I recommend business owners have a 3-month to 6-month operating budget in the bank, operating expenses in the bank before hiring. Now, I get a lot of pushback here. I get it. That is an enormous amount of money for a lot of folks. But if your business can't set that aside incrementally, you have a business model and a pricing problem. You don't have a worker capacity problem. So make sure the foundations of your business model are strong first before adding additional team members. You don't want to add an additional team member hoping they'll fix the foundation of your house when they're going to be renting the attic. So businesses ready to hire, we want to make sure they're not running out of cash before they can pay their employees. Third is deep onboarding with a trial period. Don't rush the takeoff. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Think of onboarding as laying down a safe runway extension while you're already in motion, giving the new hire space to learn, test, and build confidence before full responsibility kicks in. It's the equivalent of making sure the runway is clear of debris, because a single piece of debris, one unqualified hire, can wreck the whole takeoff. Once the wheels leave the ground, you need a flight plan. Pilots don't just wing it. They follow a flight plan, check in with the control tower, and build in checkpoints along the way. For small businesses, the flight plan might look like this. Stage commitments. This is an important but not urgent strategy. Start with short test flights. So the important but not urgent strategy allows the employees to work on things that are important to the business growth, but not urgent, right? So the client's not waiting on these things. You have a chance the business owner has a chance to review them before the client sees them. You can also start with short test flights or project-based contracts, internships, or part-time hours to see how the alignment holds up under real conditions. That helps you mitigate the risk of a full-time, long-term employee before you commit to a full payroll. Task-based skills tests and one-on-one retrospectives is the next strategy. Using small contained projects as checkpoints, each project shows where the skill gaps still are, and the retrospective afterwards lets both sides reflect what worked, what didn't, what needs support before the next quote-unquote flight. These tests aren't just about performance, they're about building confidence, catching issues early, and ensuring the business owner knows when it's safe to let the new hire into the cockpit. It also helps the new hire understand when to ask for help for things because you build in that structure and I recommend asking, what did you need help with? Or where did you get stuck? Phrasing the question that way, where did you get stuck, presumes people get stuck because we all do. And then if they didn't get stuck anywhere, they can say, oh, I didn't get stuck anywhere. But more likely than not, it's an opener to where they actually got stuck because they did get stuck. The next strategy is hosting virtual office hours. I do these regularly. I mean, twice a week for most of my teams that I work with. These are your control tower, a set time when new hires can check in, ask questions, get guidance without constraint or micromanagement. It reduces isolation, builds trust, and keeps team communication steady. The next one is directly about communication. Clear communication systems can include shared calendars, dashboards, weekly check-ins. These are your navigation system. Without them, you're flying blind. With them, you give both sides clarity on the priorities and progress. That's how you avoid veering off course. These operational strategies prevent the risk of ending up at the wrong destination. They do allow you to improvise midair. Now, even with the best runway and plan, every flight hits turbulence. Something breaks midair, a pilot gets sick, a storm reroutes the path. That's why small businesses also need systems that keep the plane flying even when things go wrong. Cross-training and role redundancy. This is your backup engine. If one person leaves, the plane doesn't nosedive. Culture checks. This is your cabin pressure. If it fails, everyone suffers. That's why value-based interview questions matter as much as technical skills. Fractional hires or independent contractors. These are your co-pilots, high-skill specialists who don't need to be onboarded forever. If the fit isn't right, you can swap them out without losing the flight. And in fact, before I ever hired any employees, I worked with an independent contractor for about a year. I found her on Fiverr. We still did onboarding, but we did it for 5 hours instead of 30 hours. She would regularly work 5 hours a week for me, and her contributions needed almost no edits. They were deliverable ready. These are the strategies that help keep business momentum without fear of one wrong move. That one wrong move will ground the whole operation. Let's review. So here's the big picture. First, build a runway, pipelines, pre-hiring, and onboarding. Second, chart the plan, stage commitments, clear communication, task-based skill tests, and virtual office hours. Third, keep the plane in the air, build in redundancy, have culture checks, and use contractors. Because every small business feels like they're building the plane while flying it, our job as advisors isn't to hand them a finished jet. It's to give them enough runway, just enough structure, and just enough backup systems so that their first hires don't feel like a death-defying stunt. That's what turns hiring from a gamble into a growth strategy. We've covered a lot of ground today, but let's bring it back to you as SBDC advisors and the businesses that you serve at that $50K revenue level. At that stage, a single hire can make or break a business. The wrong hire can stall growth or even push an entrepreneur to give up entirely. But the right approach, using the new work equation, in addition to the 10 strategies, turns hiring from a gamble into a growth strategy. That's what the new work equation is really about. Reducing the size of the failure so a small business can take the risks they need to grow without those risks being catastrophes. My $10,000 failure taught me something I carry with me to this day. Failure isn't just inevitable. It's important. We've all heard the saying, fail fast. But let's be honest, the size of that failure matters. We don't want to fail catastrophically fast. We don't want another $10,000 failure. What we want are smaller, survivable failures, the 1 hour, $20 kind of failure that teaches us something, sharpens our systems, and helps us grow without breaking us. And that's what the new work equation is designed to do. It balances the skills and flexibility of the employee with the skills and flexibility of the employer, and then adds a technology multiplier on top. The new work equation isn't about stopping mistakes. It's about structuring the business so that when mistakes happen, and they will, they're small, they're survivable, they're full of learning instead of catastrophic. That's where SBDC advisors and business advisors come in. We're the safety nets. We're the ones who help entrepreneurs reduce the size of failure, guiding them to build pipelines, create systems, and set habits that turn hiring from a gamble into a growth strategy. Because for a business at that 50K range, one hire feels enormous, and it is. But with our guidance, with the tools like the matrix, the equation, and the risk reduction strategies we've explored today, that leap feels survivable. And that's what the future of work demands from us. The courage to try, the wisdom to design for failure, and the conviction that progress is always possible. Because at its heart, the new work equation isn't just about helping businesses grow. It's about creating careers that bend instead of break, careers that allow people to balance stability, side hustles, and ambitions without having to choose one. So I'll leave you with this. If we can lower the risk of failure for small businesses, if we can make failure survivable instead of catastrophic, we can unlock their growth, their innovation, and their courage. And that, to me, is the power of the new work equation. So the next time your clients ask you, I just need one hire to get me from 50 to 100K, don't just hand them a hiring checklist. Hand them a framework that makes failure survivable. Hand them the courage to leap. Hand them the new work equation. Thank you.